distancing as the media, and now today we see it being actualized. Yesterday I did tell you that we were fewer at the Ministry of Information and Broadcasting Services, and I know our cameras are picking what we're looking at today. We have seen that we have a 1 meter space between everyone sitting. Sam, you must know that this room is a 350 seater, but what we will see today is only 50 people being a part of this address. And most importantly, Sam, every media house has had accreditation and the numbers have been reduced. So this is what you will see characterizing this event. As you can see, members of the media through your screen have already begun to sit down and adhering to what has been told here. Also, like you said in the beginning, all of us are wearing masks, from camera people to technicians. Even our technicians who are on the OB van, the outside broadcasting van, are wearing these masks as well as the gloves as part of a preventative measure. We have to practice what we preach, Sam. So this is what you will see, and it is under strict measures. As you can see, there is a step here that has a banner, and I'm hoping that we can get it. It says the media will not go past a certain point, and that point is 1 meter away from the high table. And I know that our camera person Tamara is just getting it for you, Sam, and you will be able to see it. No one is going beyond that point, and as far as the media are concerned. And the high table itself, Sam, you will see the spacings that have been put so that people do not crowd or are too close to each other. So each participant at the high table actually has their own table and a seat, as well as the hand sanitizer. I'm sure you can see it on our screen. So we are practicing social distancing. As you know, Sam, we will continue to get these kinds of updates, and we will see that more people will be told not to come here to the centers, but actually monitor what is happening from home. So it will be a busy day, and as you can see, most of the journalists are already hard at work trying to file in those stories, but we are observing social distancing. 350 sitter, only 50 journalists today.
I can see that our camera person's already there in the gear as well. Can you give us an indication how far do you think we'll have to wait before the minister comes in with an entourage in there?
Okay, Sam, so we have already seen the Zambia Revenue Authority Commissioner General walk in. He did come and see just how the room is set up, and I know that that is an indication that we are expecting the Minister of Finance and the other ministers to come and take their seat here. It's a very important issue because most people are trying to grapple with the relationship between disease burden and the economy, and I know our studio experts have continued to talk about it and how it can injure an economy like ours. So earlier on, we did hear from the Economic Association of Zambia President Dr. Lubinda Habazoka, just looking at what can be done in as far as relief when we look at the economy. Do we need a safe haven where we will not have to pay some of the debt that we have accumulated? So there is a lot of conversations that are happening. I can see that Zipper are here and various banks are here also with us, just to find out what way we will take. What is the direction? What will the minister say? And we have been waiting for this address, I know, Sam. And you do know that the banks have been key in as far as decongesting their branches, and they are promoting online banking just as a way of stopping the COVID-19. But we do know that the minister will give a holistic approach to the various issues that are affecting the economy thus far.
Thank you, Chilesha. We will be getting back to you anytime soon. Do stay on standby for us. In the meantime, the discussion continues in the studio. Developments in the Zambian economy amidst the corona virus. And in the studios, I'm with Mutisunge Zulu, the Economics Association of Zambia National Secretary, and Mr. Yusuf Doudia, Chairperson of the Private Sector Development Association. The need for social distancing can never be overemphasized, especially looking at that clip. It just tells you how serious it is. And now it's up to all of us to begin to practice it. It doesn't matter where we are. The G20, Mr. Zulu, has indicated they've put hands together. Over $5 trillion raised for this particular call. Yes. Another thought is that the least developed countries could be going on to ask for arms elsewhere. The IMF on the cards, there are indicators that there could be proposals to ask that the loan payments for such countries be deferred depending on who qualifies.
Yes. So, yes, it is actually true. There was a G20 summit of central bank governors and finance ministers right about a week ago. And the G20 countries have actually pledged about 5 trillion that should cushion the impact of IDA countries. The argument has been that, yes, on bilateral debt, it's a good suggestion because it will ease the burden. What we need to understand is that because of the previous discussion that we had around currencies weakening, it means debt to GDPs have actually also skyrocketed because the conversion uses dollar. It increases that burden. And at the same time, remember, because global sentiment has darkened, so in terms of, say, for nations that have issued euro bonds or dollar bonds, okay, the credit default spreads have blown out. If you look at, for example, Zambia's euro bonds, the 2022s are now at 46 to 49%, which is more costly than a local currency bond. So all these are burdens. And then the rating agencies, remember, they are also watching whatever is happening to potentially downgrade on the back of fiscal vulnerabilities and risks to growth that are actualizing. So you would find that there could be more. In fact, we focused more downgrades this year than upgrades because this has actually hit the whole world. So because of all this, you'd find that resources that were supposed to be for debt service, if relief is granted, will then go to reconstructing countries and reigniting and to rekindle that growth. So there'll be deliberate initiatives coming from countries that are impacted that will definitely write to the G20, to multilaterals such as the World Bank, the IMF. This is time for the IMF, the World Bank, to give the necessary guarantees that if they could extend guarantees to countries and then say cushion debt repayment, that could help with dollar debt pricing in the international capital markets. Remember, there are nations that look to the international capital markets to be able to issue bonds for refinance purposes. But because of feeble fundamentals, they will not be able to because the cost is very high. So interestingly, it covers all types of debt except for, I'm not so sure if it does cover dollar-denominated debt, which is euro bonds. Euro bonds are slightly different from bilateral debt. You can negotiate bilateral debt with cooperating partners, or if you owe China, you would go to China, write to them and negotiate. But for euro bonds, it's a harder discussion.
It is.
But the rationale is that if you could get an ease on bilateral debt, then it still frees up resources. So the decision for dollar bond holders to defer debt is more of a human conscious decision. Okay, so this is what we're going to see in this period. Will there be debt cancellation? Because other jurisdictions will be looking at probably debt cancellation to say, and then remember, this whole thing is going to shape the way contracts are going forward.
Definitely. We'll be closely looking at it. Let's quickly look at a small-scale business person in Zambia, Mr. Dodia. What should they be thinking about now?
Well, a small-scale business person needs to recognize that outside there, the cost of doing business is becoming very, very expensive. They need to re-engineer and refocus their businesses. The fact that the dollar-kwacha relationship is really putting so much pressure on the Zambian consumer in terms of price rises. As an SME, I would be looking at focusing my business on what is it that I can do in Zambia that is economically making sense. In other words, how do I move away from import-dependent inputs and look at more local inputs, because the local inputs are not being impacted on by the runaway kwacha to dollar relationship. So I think that businesses have to feel the pulse of the economy and adjust themselves in order to find a niche where they can perform. But also, I think we have come to a point also where every business in Zambia needs to say, we are in a crisis level as a business, and therefore forget about expansion, forget about business growth in a medium to long-term perspective. We need to look at survival. So businesses now ought to be looking at how can we pay our workers, how can we turn over money on a daily basis, and how can we just survive this storm with a prediction that the storm is likely to be there for the next 2 to 3 months. That should be the horizon of most of our small businesses. But localize as much as possible. Businesses need to look at localizing because the squeeze from outside is going to increase. Because you see, when we're looking at our businesses here, we might think, well, it's just about borders. Not only just about borders. A country like China, which has done some miraculous changes, you know, they've managed to literally eradicate the coronavirus, meaning that their manufacturing capacity is going to go back up. Yes. But look at some of our neighbors. Look at South Africa. South Africa are grappling with the coronavirus right now. It means factories in South Africa are likely to shut down. And if they shut down or go slow, it means supply to Zambia is likely to be restricted.
Indeed. So stay with us here on ZNBC TV1. We are going to go to Mulungushi International Conference Center, where we expect the Minister of Finance to take the lead to give us the indicators of the Zambian economy amidst the coronavirus outbreak. Records in Zambia, 16 cases as we speak. We are going to take a short break. When we do return, we will be taking you to various places where we've been with our team to look at how people are complying to hygienic standards that have been set by the ministry so that we can be able to adhere. For now, let's take a break. We will be returning. Thank you so much for still staying with us. Like we have mentioned, developments in the Zambian economy is exactly what we are going to get when the Minister of Finance takes the lead today at the Mulungushi International Conference Center. This is just a build-up program, and in studio I have Mr. Yusuf Dodia and Mtisunga Zolo, experts in their own capacity to give us, the dynamics of how the economy is shaping up. Thank you so much for joining us via Facebook, ZMBC today, and quite a couple of people are already there watching us. Memory in Pomboloka is in Germany. Thank you so much, Memory. Winford Njovu is in Cape Town, South Africa. We know that South Africa is under lockdown. We hope that you are adhering to those rules and regulations. A lot of questions are coming in on ZMBC today. Please keep them coming. Time and again, we'll be getting there to just ask the panel here now. They'll be responding to them. We've already picked 3 questions from our Facebook, ZMBC today Facebook. Yes, we will be getting back to Mulungushi International Conference Center anytime. So now the question, one of the most important questions they're asking on Facebook is, how can an owner of a business stop moving? This we could say maybe it's an employee, stop moving if the owner of the business is stopping them from.
Yes, well, look, I think the owners of businesses need to take this very seriously. That number one is they need to manage a smaller group of employees, because the more employees you have, the more the opportunity of the virus spreading there will be. Businesses also need to recognize that they're not going to make as much money as they made before. We are going into a recession period in terms of business. The idea is that businesses today are trying to serve the public the best they can, given the risks that are there. And with these risks, the owners of those businesses need to recognize that they themselves are at risk. This is like HIV. You don't talk of HIV on other people. It comes to you as well. And I think that with the coronavirus, it's even worse, because the ability to be infected is so high that I think our businesses need to be very, very careful that they need to run their businesses at a level where they are not the risks.
Indeed. There are a lot of questions coming in. One of them is, how long are they able to hang on as businesses, and for how long can their business be survive amidst the coronavirus? The national anthem has just ended at the Mulungushi International Conference Center. The Minister of Finance is already there. Now let's cross there so that we indeed get it from the Minister in charge of finances in Zambia to give us an indication of the developments in the Zambian economy.
Lord, we pray for the whole world. We pray for our nation, Zambia. And as we do this deliberation, we pray that you come before us and we place everything into your hands. So in the mighty name of Jesus Christ, we pray, thanksgiving in our hearts. Amen.
Amen. We may be seated, please. The Honorable Minister of Finance, Honorable Dr. Walyangandu, the Minister of Commerce, Honorable Christopher Yaluma. I recognize the presence of the Minister of Mines, Honorable Msukwa, the Secretary to the Treasury, Mr. Fredson Yamba, the Deputy Secretary to Cabinet, Mr. Christopher Mvunga, Permanent Secretary for Budget and Economic Affairs in the Ministry of Finance, Dr. Emmanuel Pam, Permanent Secretary for Economic Management and Finance, Mr. Mkuli Chikuba, the Controller of Internal Audit, Madam Joyce Sundano, the Accountant General, Mr. Kennedy Msonda. I recognize also in our midst the Commissioner General of the Zambia Revenue Authority, Mr. Kingsley Chanda. I recognize directors and CEOs from select public institutions who are with us here, and private sector institutions, other senior government, ZRA and Bank of Zambia officials present here, colleagues from the media, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. This morning, we have a very, very special event at which the Honorable Minister of Finance is going to give us an update on developments in the economy, the domestic and the global economy. But before the Minister comes forward to make his remarks, which remarks will be preceded by remarks from the Secretary to the Treasurer, who will call upon him, we do need to perform an act of compliance here. So I'll call upon Mr. Mvula Zakeo, who is the Chief Environmental Health Officer from the Ministry of Health, to come and give us his remarks, and thereafter we'll proceed with the program.
Thank you. Good morning. I'm Mvula Zakeo, as mentioned, from Minister of Health, Chief Environmental Health Officer. As Minister of Health, we have assessed this conference room, and this room has complied with the necessary regulations, and we hereby recommend that the press briefing goes ahead. Thank you.
Thank you. With that assurance from Minister of Health, it is now my honor and privilege to call upon the Secretary to the Treasury to come and raise the Honorable Minister of Finance. ST, sir. Thank you.
Good morning, Honorable Minister of Finance and ministers present. I'll take the protocols by the Master of Ceremonies as mine. And it is indeed because of the onset of the coronavirus that the Minister of Finance would like to present a picture on how the economy looks like today and going forward. So I would now take this honor and opportunity to call upon the Honorable Minister of Finance, Dr. Walyangandu. Honorable Minister, sir.
I suppose I can take this off for the purpose of clarity. My colleagues, the honorable ministers for Commerce, Trade and Industry, and Mines and Mineral Development, the secretary to the Treasury, the permanent secretaries, dear colleagues, good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and I'd like to thank you for honoring our invitation to this press briefing. I do notice that we're keeping, I think, a safe distance, and I hope that complies with the regulations that we are required to operate under. And again, to just wish everybody to be careful and remember to remain safe. As we are all aware, the world has experienced an unprecedented outbreak of the COVID-19, more commonly known as the coronavirus. The latest update from the World Health Organization indicates that over 470,000 confirmed cases have been recorded around the world, and more than 20,000 deaths have been reported. In Zambia, 16,000 confirmed cases have been recorded as at 26 March 2020. Our sympathies, 16 as on 26 March 2020. Our sympathies go out to all those who have lost their loved ones all over the world due to this pandemic. The impact of the outbreak has been both extensive and severe, including but not limited to a health crisis and an economic crisis which is characterized by financial market stress and a collapse of commodity prices. The outbreak has led to disruptions in supply chains, created uncertainties, and significantly dampened near-term growth prospects. Following these developments, various sector ministries have provided updates and a range of measures to contain the spread of the pandemic within the Zambian economy. In addition, His Excellency the President on Wednesday, 25th March 2020, gave a number of directives which I would like to reiterate here for the purpose of emphasis and to indicate the significance of the statements that he made. One, that Zambian missions abroad and the Department of Immigration must be alleged to review the issuance of visas for people wanting to travel to Zambia, as well as all ports of entry into the country for all travelers from countries that are affected by the pandemic. 2, travelers will be allowed entry into Zambia. However, upon screening, those who exhibit symptoms will be quarantined in a medical facility for treatment, while all other travelers without symptoms will be quarantined for at least 14 days. 3, government has suspended non-essential foreign travel, particularly to countries which have confirmed COVID-19 cases. And 4, public gatherings such as conferences, weddings, funerals, festivals are to be restricted to at least 50 people, subject to them complying with public health authority guidelines. And 5, restaurants must operate only on a takeaway basis. And 6, all bars, nightclubs, cinemas, gyms, and casinos must close. And lastly, all international flights to and from Hari Mwanga Nkumbula, Simon Mwanseka Pwepwe, and in 4 international airports are suspended. Instead, all international flights should land at and depart from Kenneth Kaunda Airport only. This is to ensure efficient and effective screening of all travelers, as well as following them up by our health authorities. Now, following from these directives, I would like now to discuss the impact of the pandemic on both the global and the domestic economies, with a view to providing citizens, business houses, and investors a preliminary assessment of the changed economic landscape and mitigatory measures that are to be undertaken. The impact on the global economy. There is a slowing down in global growth. Preliminary assessments by the International Monetary Fund indicate a substantial slowdown in global economic growth in 2020 compared to 2019. The full assessment is expected to be provided at the upcoming virtual spring meeting of the IMF. 2, there's a drag on global trade. Global trade has slowed down following closure of borders and the lockdown in major economies. The reduction in merchandise trade has impacted negatively on revenues, particularly by commodity exporting countries such as ourselves. The cancellation of flights by major carriers has also impacted negatively on trade in services such as tourism. 3, plummeting of commodity prices. Commodity prices have dramatically reduced. In the case of copper, prices opened the year at $6,165 per ton, but closed at 4,754 metric tons per ton on Wednesday, 25th March 2020, while stocks of London stock market have surged to about 225,000 metric tons from about 145,000 metric tons in January 2020. There's also a flight in the of capital in the financial market. The financial market have not been spared by this scourge. The international economy has seen investors divest their funds from traditional assets such as stocks to safe havens that include the US dollar. This has resulted in the US dollar strengthening against other currencies, including the Zambian kwacha. Now, I'd like to turn my attention to the impact of the COVID-19 on the Zambian economy. I will now give a preliminary assessment of the scourge on the Zambian economy. I should mention that the full extent of its impact will depend on the severity and duration that this pandemic lasts. But while discussing this pandemic and its impact, I also want to call your attention that the situation that I'm describing must be seen against the other shocks that this economy has recently experienced, and this include the droughts that we observed in the last quarter of last year relating to the southern part of this country, and now the floods that are ravaging substantial parts of the northern part of the country, and also the disruptions that resulted from the gassing incidents that we observed. Now, in terms of GDP growth, you may recall that during the 2020 budget address, I projected that the Zambian economy would grow at 3.2%. In view of the recent developments, growth is now projected to be lower at around 2%, despite the anticipated significant recovery in the agricultural sector. The tourism, mining, manufacturing, construction, as well as wholesale and retail trade sectors are projected to slow down on account of this pandemic. Tourism. In the specific case of tourism, disruptions in international air transport from the United States of America, Europe, Asia, and within Africa indeed, have had an adverse effect on tourist arrivals. Although the reduction in international air traffic arrivals was about 5% in the first 2 months of this year compared to last year, it is anticipated that there will be a sharper decline in March and the months to come. This follows an increase in the number of cancellations of pre-booked tour packages coupled with travel restrictions and lockdowns in other jurisdictions. Emirates Airlines, Rwanda Air, and South African Airways have suspended flights into Zambia, while other carriers such have scaled down the number of flights into the country. Consequently, some hotels and lodges have already reported significant reductions in bed occupancy rates to less than 20% from an average of 50% for the same period of the year last year. Based on current information, occupancy rates are expected to decline further. In addition, closure and restricted operating hours are also affecting the operations of various businesses. This has drastically reduced both tax and non-tax revenue and is posing a challenge to employment in the sector. Mining. As alluded to earlier, copper prices have declined by 23% to $4,754 per metric ton as at 25th March 2020 from $6,165 per metric ton in January 2020. This represents a reduction of about $1,400 per ton. Consequently, copper export earnings are expected to decline substantially by more than $1 billion in 2020 if the situation persists. And I need to emphasize that if the situation persists. It follows, therefore, that mineral royalty tax collections will also decline. On the fiscal side, revenues under the 2020 budget are projected to be lower on account of slowdown in economic activity. Collections under VAT, customs duties, income tax, and mineral royalty are expected to decline. For instance, in February 2020, revenue and grants collections were recorded at 4.6 billion kwacha, which was 4% below the target. More particularly, collections from mining company tax and overall VAT were below target by 32 and 13% respectively. Revenue collected in March 2020 thus far stands at 2.7 billion kwacha against the target of 4.5 billion kwacha. This trend could continue if the pandemic persists. On the expenditure side, the depreciation of the kwacha against major currencies is resulting in higher debt service than programmed. Further expenditures are also increasing to respond to the pandemic. In order to accommodate the decrease in revenues, increase in debt service payments, and expenditures in response to the pandemic, it is expected that other expenditures in the budget will have to be scaled down. In terms of trade, the virus has disrupted international trade in terms of both volumes and commodity prices. Collections of trade taxes are expected to be lower than projected in the first quarter of the year and most likely going beyond. There's also disruption in cross-border supply chains given Zambia's close trading relations in the Southern African region. This will have a significant negative impact on small and medium-scale businesses. Preliminary information indicates that there was a significant reduction in imports from China, which has emerged as a major trading partner for us, both in dollar terms and in volumes in the month of February compared to February 2019. In addition, in March 2020, the volumes of imports from India, Japan, Kenya, Namibia, and Tanzania have declined relative to March 2019. Given the lockdown announced by South Africa, imports from that country will decline further, with direct adverse impact on wholesale and retail trade, manufacturing, and mining. To this end, revenue collections in the form of VAT and custom duty in March 2020 are expected to be below target by 25%. Exchange rate depreciation. Following the depreciation in terms of trade from the fourth quarter of 2019 relating to some of the measures that I announced before, as a result of the decline in copper prices and other shocks, the kwacha has been on a depreciation trend. More recently, the kwacha has depreciated by more than 20% to around 17 kwacha 50 ngwe per US dollar. The kwacha has come under more intense pressure as a result of the coronavirus, which has impacted most emerging market currencies due to flight to safety that has resulted in strengthening of the US dollar. In terms of inflation, annual inflation is projected to remain above the target range of 6 to 8%. Inflation, as announced by the Zambia Statistical Agency yesterday for the month of March, stood at 14%. Food inflation, exchange rate depreciation, the effects of electricity and petroleum price adjustment have led to the increase in the overall inflation. More recently, panic buying, particularly of essential commodities such as meal, has a potential of further increasing inflation. We encourage businesses and retail outlets to avoid taking advantage of the pandemic to distort prices and therefore worsen the inflation spiral. Let me now turn to the financial sector. The broader impact on the financial sector is likely to be observed with lags as the economy faces the challenges I have earlier outlined, which translate into rising non-performing loans. This is adding to the liquidity constraints that the financial sector is already facing. I would like now to just focus on the measures that we intend to take or are implementing in order to mitigate the impact of the coronavirus. In response to the challenges that I have presented, we have implemented a number of first-line measures which include: 1, funding towards the response to the coronavirus. In order to finance the response towards the coronavirus, government has taken the following measures. 1, set up an epidemic preparedness fund under the Ministry of Health amounting to 57 million kwacha. Cabinet also approved a coronavirus contingency and response plan with a budget of 659 million kwacha under the Disaster Management and Mitigation Unit. And 3, the government has started mobilizing funds through the budget and engagement with various local and international stakeholders. The second area of intervention is the possibility of tapping into resources available from the multilateral organizations. We are in the process of making applications to our multilateral partners or partner organizations for support. As announced, the International Monetary Fund is making available a total of $50 million US dollars to affected countries via rapid dispersing emergency facilities, while the World Bank Group has approved support of up to $14 billion US dollars under the fast track COVID-19 facility. The third intervention area relates to the easing of liquidity. To support the easing of liquidity in the face of adverse effects of the virus, government will release 2.5 billion kwacha to deal with the following. One, reduce domestic arrears owed to domestic suppliers of goods and services. This will not just put liquidity in the economy, but give support to the small and medium enterprises which have been heavily affected by non-payment from the past. Two, reduce outstanding arrears to pensioners under Public Service Pension Fund and retirees under the Ministry of Justice. And three, reduce outstanding third-party arrears and other employee-related commitments. In addition, 140 million kwacha will be released to pay local contractors within the road sector. Let me now touch on a few tax relief measures that at this point in time we are prepared to address. And these include one, suspension of excise duty on ethanol for use in alcohol-based sanitizers and other medicine-related activities, subject to guidelines that will be issued by the Zambia Revenue Authority. To remove provisions of SI 90 relating to claim of VAT on imported spare parts, lubricants and stationery to ease pressure on companies. Three, suspend export duties on the importation of concentrates in the mining sector to ease pressure on the sector. And four, suspend export duty on precious metals and crocodile skin. In terms of the financial sector, the measures that we intend to implement include that the government has announced through the Bank of Zambia a number of measures. The Bank of Zambia has taken these measures in order to encourage the use of digital financial services. These measures are aimed at preventing the spread of the disease by minimizing person-to-person contact in conducting financial transactions, decongesting banks, and reducing the use of cash. The measures specifically are as follows. One, the bank has waived for person-to-person electronic money transfers of up to 150 kwacha all charges that would apply. These transactions are now free of charge. The bank has revised upward transactions and balance limits for individuals, small-scale farmers and enterprises. The limits by agents have been revised upwards to give agents more float to deal with transactions. This is made to decongest banks. And three, the bank has removed the transaction and balance limits on agents and corporate wallets. And four, the bank has reduced the processing fee for real-time gross settlement system. Again, this is intended to make it cheaper for you to transact electronically. I wish to urge business and organizations to take advantage of these revisions or measures by adopting mobile money and other electronic forms to pay for goods and services to safeguard against or reduce the possibility of spreading the disease. In addition, government will issue a statutory instrument for classification and provisioning of loan directives to encourage financial providers to provide relief to the private sector and facilitate long-term lending to productive sector of the economy. We expect that the banking sector will pass these benefits to their own clients. I would like now to address the area of business continuity from our perspective in the ministry. With regard to the single treasury account, the Integrated Financial Management Information System, which we refer to as IFMIS, and the Payroll Management and Establishment Control, which we call PEMIC, government has put in place measures to enable continuity of its operations by making it possible for officers to work remotely. So if it comes to the point where officers have to leave the office and work from home, we have measures in place that will ensure that the system will continue to work and officers will be able to work remotely. Now, in view of the anticipated difficulties in importing various consumer goods, we now have an opportunity to work with major retail outlets in building domestic value chains that will encourage the sale of domestically produced goods in our major supermarkets. The Minister of Commerce, Trade and Industry, working with us in the Ministry of Finance, will be engaging very soon the major retail outlets to see to it that this process begins in earnest. This is a silver lining to this cloud, that we can begin to develop opportunity for manufacturers of goods, for producers of agricultural products to now bring their goods to be sold through the many retail chains that we have in the various shopping malls in this country. So this is a process that will begin, and we hope that we will establish not just the new domestic value chains which will last for the period of this pandemic, but also can see us beyond that. In conclusion, ladies and gentlemen, I wish to emphasize that the measures I've announced are the initial response to the impact of the virus. The initial response. Government may take additional measures to support the economy and respond specifically to the challenges the business community may face, as well as safeguard the financial sector should the situation worsen. In closing, government will continue to review developments as they unfold and take appropriate measures where necessary. Most importantly, prevention is key. And my appeal to all is that we must exercise utmost personal hygiene and conduct as guided by His Excellency the President, the Ministry of Health and the World Organization. Failure to do so will result in devastating health, economic and financial consequences for this country, and the country cannot afford those consequences. May God bless you all, and may God bless our great nation. I thank you.
Thank you very much, Honorable Minister. At this point in time, we wish to recognize our co-sponsors who are Zambian breweries, represented this morning by the Director in charge of Government Relations, Mr. Ezekiel Sakele. We thank you very much for your consideration in bringing this live broadcast on ZNBC TV 1 and ZNBC Radio 2. The event is also being broadcast live on Smart Eagles. For those who are online, you can follow Smart Eagles on their page. But also we do have the event being broadcast live on Diamond TV. May I request my colleagues from the media, those who wish to move these mics from here to where the minister is sitting. Let me move them. I will move them, not everybody. I will move them because the minister will take his questions from the table. So those who wish to ask, there is a podium that is provided right in your circle there. So you just move to the circle, and that's where you make your comment or ask your question. For now, perhaps the director on TV can allow me to move the mics while our colleagues prepare to ask their questions. As you come to ask your question, please indicate your name and the institution that you are coming from. Thank you.
the Minister of Finance, Dr. Waliangandu, they are giving a speech, very, very important pronouncements pronounced in there. And now he's giving chance to members of the media to just ask some questions. And so we'll be expected back in the studio here after all is done from Mulungushi International Conference Center. Questions and answers will be provided. And then here in the studios, our panel of experts, Economics Association of Zambia and Mr. Yusuf Dodia will quickly attend to this. But quick thoughts, Mr. Dodia, what has caught your attention?
Well, I think the big thing is the amount of money that government has started to put in place. You know, the epidemic fund, the epidemic response plan, which is also being funded, the money which is being allocated to clear domestic arrears and employee-related facilities. I think that was very important.
I saw Mtisunge nod ahead when you had the suspension on some of the export duties.
Yes, exactly, because we had mentioned Kasumbalesa shutting down, and we were very worried about feeds, copper concentrates coming there. So I think, well, some of these decisions should have actually been made earlier than it didn't have to take COVID-19, especially on that. And then ethanol as well, it's good because then the local manufacturers are then given a boost. I think that's exactly
what but I have a problem because you see, ethanol is an input to make and making, you're talking of a timeline of 1 week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 1 month. I think the minister should have been much more aggressive. He should have said sanitizers, masks, all PPE, personal protective equipment, duty-free with immediate effect, so that the private sector could quickly move into motion, and within 3 or 4 days you would see the impact of it. Ethanol is an input in making the sanitizer, and therefore you are looking at a value chain that has got some timeline before we begin to see the benefits. And look at the prices. The prices are way too expensive. Whether you bring it in, how will people afford to buy that small bottle for 30 kwacha?
All right, so let's get back to Mulungushi International Conference Center, where the members of the media now are asking questions to the Honorable Minister.
I think you've elaborated that from January we were trading at about 14 on average. And as of yesterday, the kwacha is trading to, slightly now reaching and crossing the 18 kwacha per $1 range. Now, the impact that this steep depreciation has is so profound. I mean, Zambia as a country itself, we do have international debt, which is contracted in US dollar, but has to be paid by some of the takings from the Zambia Revenue Authority, which are coming mostly, or part of it in kwacha. And then also when you look at generally our consumer goods, including some of the items that we are locally manufacturing in the country, have got components of imported items. We are talking of cement for construction, we're talking of different areas. And I wanted to bring one item that we just saw yesterday, where countries in Africa, I think it's Nigeria, I may be mistaken on that, have taken an immediate action of sort of limiting the transactions in the forex market just to stem the rapid depreciation, because the rate at which we've moved just from January to March is quite alarming. And the question, therefore, is what immediate measures is the Ministry of Finance, obviously working with the Bank of Zambia and the various agencies across, commerce and so on, what actions are you taking immediately, at least to bring the currency to some level of control? I know the situation with COVID-19 is uncharted territory. Comments have come through saying that this time is only related to war times. So what immediate actions? Because if this is not taken care of, and from the Zambian Business Times, because we do, our main area is business, we know that the profound effect of this will be so magnanimous and threatens the economic well-being, which filters through the entire chain. The second question, quickly, is the relationship of the Ministry of Finance to the rating agencies, especially international rating agencies. I want to find out, and on behalf of the country, in terms of what proactive measures has your ministry and as a country taken to ensure that there's some kind of a negotiated way in which these ratings are being issued. The impact of rating agencies, yes, sometimes those reports come out, we may not see them, but you'll find that the impact in terms of lending rates, in terms of the ability of the financial market to lend, is so pervasive. More especially in a country like Zambia, where the financial sector is, dominated by multinational banks, which use these rating agencies as benchmarks for pricing of loans. Thank you.
Okay, I think let me deal with those questions. The first question relates to the exchange rate. All right. Now, I think we all are fairly familiar with the fact that the exchange rate regime in this country allows for a free exchange of currency. There are no restrictions that have been imposed on the exchange. That's the current system. Now, if I did understand the spirit of your question, what you are really alluding to is, should we be considering introducing exchange controls? That, I think, is the spirit of that question. Now, that decision is a decision that requires profound review, profound analysis. It's not a decision that you make easily. And as I said earlier on, that we have introduced the measures we have introduced as a first line measure. We are looking at a whole lot of other variables that need to be considered. I am sure that in the review of these, we will look at the exchange, the foreign exchange system that operates in this country, and weigh the potential benefits or lack of benefits that might follow from changing the current regime. So it's something that we cannot take lightly, something that we'll review carefully. But I think ultimately at the end of the day, we need to bear in mind that the exchange rate is really a factor that balances the supply side and the demand side. What we have seen in the last year or so is a gradual reduction in the price of copper, now that has been accelerated as a result of the pandemic. I think I did mention that the price of copper has now dropped close to $2,000 per ton. That's a huge drop in the price, and clearly what that does is to affect our ability to earn more hard currency coming into the country. But this is a situation that we have to consider, and we will be informing the nation if we think that there is a need for a change in the regime. Now, with respect to rating agencies, we have twice in a year we meet with the rating agencies, and in our meetings we present the information relating to the performance of the economy and all the various variables that they'll like to look at. But it's not our decision how they interpret that information. It's not even our decision how they package it and how they present it. That's entirely their decision. I think you will know that a lot of countries have their views about whether the reporting is itself accurate, and very few, a number of countries have views about whether in fact the rating agencies sometimes tend to be fickle in their own assessment of the developments taking place on the ground. But we do have meetings with them, and we deal with, I know that more recently the issue that we have been dealing with the rating agencies has been around the issue of debt and our debt management ability or capability. But we think that we are making progress in this space as we implement some of the measures that government, that cabinet actually directed that the Minister of Finance implements with a view to constricting the fiscal space. So as we make improvements in the area of debt management, and as our debt profile begins to get better, I think you'll be able to see more favorable or more positive reporting from the rating agencies. But it's not up to us to tell them what they should write. They write what they want to write, and sometimes you may take a view that maybe what they write is not actually accurate. But that's the position as things stand right now. I thank you.
Thank you very much. Colleagues, as you come to make a comment or ask, please try and be as brief as possible so that we can give each other opportunities to ask. Do we have another interest? There was Logic, and then Kalonde, you come after. The Minister, he is this morning with the Minister of Commerce, Honorable Yaluma, the Minister of Mines, Honorable Msukwa. There's also the Deputy Secretary to the Cabinet, Mr. Mvunga, the Secretary to the Treasury, PS Finance, Mr. Mkuli, PS Budget, Dr. Pamu, and the Commissioner General of the Zambia Revenue Authority. We recognize in our midst also Honorable Peter Daka, who has just joined us, and the coordinator for DMMU, Mr. Chanda. We will start with Logic and thereafter Kalonde.
Thank you. Good morning, Minister. My name is Logic Lukwanda from Phoenix FM. I have several questions, but they're quite short and direct. So, the first question, Minister, is on points of clarification on your statement. I would like to know when these measures take effect that you've just announced, and then coupled to that, we've seen several economies in the world that have been hit hard by this COVID-19 have come out with specific stimulus packages to inject in the economy to make sure that they remain afloat. But apart from the 2.5 billion kwacha that is to be paid to areas or to local suppliers, what other specific measures, apart from engaging the IMF and World Bank, that could be done to ensure that the economy benefits from that and remains a bit stronger? And then I would like to get the specific components in terms of funding that will be cut in the 2020 national budget as you announced. And maybe tied to that, have you calculated, following the suspension of import and excise duties on various sectors you have indicated here, and how much is likely to be lost in that regard? My last question, with everything that has happened, we have 1 month of import cover. What assurance are you giving to the nation that if the COVID-19 outbreak continues, the country will not fail to import? Thank you.
Good morning, Kalonde from Zambia Daily Mail. Logic asked most of my questions, but I would like to find out if there are any specific tax holidays, breaks rather, you're going to give the hospitality industry. You rightly highlighted how the tourism sector has been impacted by the coronavirus. So what incentives are you putting to cushion the sector? Thank you very much.
Thank you. I don't know if I got the name right. Was it Logic, as Logic in Impali? So, Benson Logic. All right. You asked when the measures I've announced will take effect. Some of them already have taken effect. Some of them will take effect as soon as we issue the statutory instrument. I think there are 1 or 2 statutory instruments on my table which I need to sign after I leave this place. So we will be implementing them immediately. In terms of the question relating to what other countries have done in response to the situation, I need to warn against comparing things which are not like. I think when we make comparisons, it's always good to compare like with like. I did elaborate the point very clearly. I spent quite a lot of time explaining that this impact. So we feel like we're on the downward spiral. So in that environment, it's really not the best time for you to start looking for stimulus packages as such. What we should be doing is to see how we can support the productive sector to be even in this first place into some of the packages that the World Bank are proposing to. We hope that those measures they'll be able to.
All right, we'll be getting back to the minister's response to questions being asked to him by members of the media. And we will be getting back immediately when we have some stability in visual there. And we seem to be coming back. The minister is still answering some questions asked to him by members of the media. Stay with us as we take you back there. The minister is on the floor.
Also gobbling quite substantial amounts of money. Now, in this kind of situation, it's very difficult for you to find extra resources that you would use to create the kind of stimulus or fiscal stimulus that you're probably talking about based on what other countries have done. We have 1 month of import cover. What assurance do I have that that we will not find ourselves unable to import? Well, one of the things that you realize is that the balance here is between imports and exports. And what we have been seeing in the last few months is that as the kwacha depreciates, there's a slowing down in the import side of things. So you're probably getting a we're probably experiencing, if you like, a slowdown in the amount of, or the rate at which the foreign currency is being depleted. But it is a matter of concern, because I did mention that we have a reduction in the mineral tax from the mining companies, and it's the mineral tax that helps us sustain the levels of foreign reserves that we have in the country. But that's a situation that we have in front of us right now. We hope that as we work through the measures, we'll be able to support the mining industry as much as we can. We'll be having the Minister of Mines and myself, in fact, will be going out and meet with the mining companies to specifically speak to them and try to find out exactly how they can be helped to remain strong and productive during this period of time. And I hope that some of those measures will help to support the mining industry to go through this very difficult time, so that they'll be able to continue bringing in the foreign exchange that we need to support our activities. Tax holidays, alternative industry. I think pretty much the same as the question that was asked by Logic. I don't know if you are aware that a good number of companies in this country actually do enjoy a lot of tax advantage. The Zambia Development Agency does offer a whole range of incentives to a number of companies which are operating in certain areas of the country, particularly the areas that we consider to be rural areas. Whether we are in the position at this point in time to consider giving additional incentives to other companies is obviously something that we are still pondering on. You need to remember that while all this is happening, government has to stay open. Government has to function. And for government to function, it has to have some resources. So we have a balancing act here between what we can give by way of forfeiting taxes to allow business to grow and be strong, and also what can come into the treasury so that we can run government. We have to buy medicines, and particularly now we have to be in a position to respond to any possible deterioration in the current state of the national health. So all these are issues for us. It's a question of balancing what we're able to give and also what we think should come in to help us keep the operations of government running. I thank you.
Honorable Minister, maybe just a point of correction. So on the imports, or months of import cover, it's 1.9, not 1 month. I think, again, it's just so that we have the correct information in the public domain. So it's 1.9 months of import cover and not 1 month for our reserves. Thank you.
We are obviously trying to make this gathering as short and as brief as possible. I can't remember how many minutes were given by the health people. So let's be quick in our questions so that we can quickly disperse before one or two of us catches something they don't need to catch.
No, you're not catching it.
Good morning, Honorable Minister and the entire high table. My name is Nancy from Zambia Daily Mail. I think mine is a short question. I just wanted to find out what guarantee government has that it will be able to benefit from the funds that are being provided by multilateral institutions like the IMF. And also I wanted clarification on the 57 million contingency fund. I wanted to know the source of the money which government has. Thank you.
Probably the easiest way in which I can answer the first question is to just quickly give you an indication of what is available on the table, because it will give you a sense of what we can access and what we cannot. In terms of the International Monetary Fund, the fund has, out of the 50 billion, 10 billion is available at 0 interest rate for poorest members from the rapid credit facility. So there is 10 million and it's available for applying. I am told that that might have a condition of debt sustainability to be demonstrated. If that is the case, then we'll obviously have to find a way of addressing that. Then there is also another 10 billion, which is for low-income countries. And the fund has rapid dispersing emergency financing. This can be accessed without having a full-fledged IMF program. I know that people have been talking about us having a program, but the condition under this particular facility is that we don't have to have a program with the IMF for us to access this facility. And then there are other facilities which members can access called the emergency financing through the rapid financing instrument and so on. So there are specific programs that are available. We are working on applying for a relief under these different windows, obviously depending upon which ones that we qualify for. Are there guarantees? Life is not about guarantees. Life is about taking advantage of an opportunity that is made available to you, and we think that this is giving an opportunity that's available. The World Bank also has its own facility, and under IDA, there are already committed funds that can be dispersed. Under IDA 19, the World Bank has committed funds to Zambia. We'll be asking for those funds to be dispersed upfront. And a few other areas here available which we can tap into. I also need to mention that there is a facility that's available under IFC, which will be useful for the business community. You have 2 billion which is available, the real sector crisis response facility, which will support existing clients in the infrastructure, manufacturing, and agriculture. There's 2 billion from the existing global trade finance program, which will cover the payment risks of financial institutions so they can provide trade financing facility, and so we hope our banking system can tap into that. There is 2 billion for the Working Capital Solutions Program, which will provide funding to emerging market banks to extend credit to help business shore up their working capital. So this is, in fact, one that we'll be encouraging our banks in this country to look at. So there are all these facilities which are available, and I hope that we should be able to tap into them. 57 million, well, this came from our budget. This was upfronted from our budget. We financed it with our own resources. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll take 2 questions. After that, we'll come to the last set. We'll start with the lady here, then Madam here, and Wenson. Yeah.
My name is Gladys Luizi from the Zambian Business Times newspaper. Given the impact that COVID-19 on the country, that COVID-19 has on the country's economy, I would want to find out from the Ministry of Commerce, Honorable Yaloma. It is clear that internal trade is the only option that seems to be available within the country due to the COVID-19 situation. So are there any actions or anything that is going to be done by the ministry to ensure this kind of trade within the country thrives?
Thank you. Madam and Wenson.
Thank you very much, Gladys. Firstly, I'd like to just make you understand the situation Zambia has been exposed into. Firstly, Zambia is very dependent on imports. And a situation like this, of course, like what the minister said, raises opportunities for us within our country to tap into some other means of trying to, cushion what we are going through due to COVID-19. We are saying, he said at the beginning that let's ensure that the retail chain stores bring in local products onto the market, and that we are pushing as much as possible to ensure that whatever we have from our local supplies take shape into the local chain stores. But there are other things where we're saying we need manufacturing locally to support the needs within the country. So we are also emphasizing that our manufacturing industry do increase manufacturing so that we'll also tap into that to support what will be the deficit from the imports, if we can't get the imports. You know very well, he talked about ethanol for health and hygiene products. Health and hygiene products, the local industries have committed that they can supply if they can have a foreign component into the manufacturing process, which means we are looking at easing their way of accessing that foreign component for their manufacturing, like ethanol, which is very much used into our health and hygiene products. We have said we'll drop the excise duty, which is being looked at with the Commissioner General of ZRA, so that we can have that available in abundance to the people around here. But one thing is, we said we must, diversify around agriculture, manufacturing. Those are key to supply what we are going in right now. So we are very much encouraging to continue value addition of our abundant, resources which is contained or endowed within the country, because that will support the retail chains or other outlets within the country. So this has got spin-offs which we can learn from or pick a plus out of it. And we must now go full throttle to ensure that we value add to our abundant resources, that we look at non-traditional exports. Then that will also encourage or help us build up now our future for the better. So this thing we are in is got also spin-offs, not only negatives as we look at it, because we are, faced with this COVID-19. Let's be innovative, that we can think outside the box and make use of our opportunities we have to sustain our economy locally. I thank you.
I think, Justin, to add to what the minister said, there's probably another variable here that is key, and that is the financing side of things. I'll be working very closely with the Minister of Commerce, Trade and Industry, and with the banking system, because our situation right now is not a normal situation, and therefore we need to get everybody in the different sectors to begin to think somewhat differently. So we're hoping that we can engage the banking sector in a somewhat slightly different way than we've done in the past, and we hope that they can come to the table and support this transformation from being dependent on everything coming from outside to begin to build a viable and sustainable base on which we can now produce a lot more things for ourselves. We just can't be people who continue to consume what other people produce. We need to become a people that can produce for ourselves and begin to export to others. And as I said in my presentation, this might be a very bad time for all of us, but I think it gives us an opportunity for us to begin to think somewhat differently. I do think that one of the factors also that we require is just to undergo this transformation in the way we think. I have said this over and over, and I want to say it again, that in the Zambian mentality, we have a default program. When you're thinking of where do I get this particular item, nobody thinks about how can we produce or how can we manufacture it. It's where can we import it from. So if something is missing, it's always where can we import it from, not how can we make it. And I think now is our chance to begin to think differently. We have the resource base on which we can build a very sound manufacturing base in this country. It's a question of bringing all the factors together, which includes finance. But also it's important that we begin to believe in ourselves that we can do things. We can make things. We can make all these things. Where is this from? I'm just looking at this. Well, this one is made here. At least this, it's nice to know. We can make these things. We can make more things. And I think this is the chance. But my colleague and I in the ministry are fully committed to begin this process of transformation. And I hope that by the time we are done, we'll have achieved something at the end of the day. Thank you.
We'll take the last set of questions, but before the Honorable Minister responds to those questions after they are asked, we will have a vote of thanks, then the responses will be given and the closure, because we are coming to the limit of the time that we should be in here as per Minister of Health regulations. So we'll take the last set of questions, and then before they are responded to, we'll have a vote of thanks from Mr. Ernest Mande, who is the Director for Government Relations at Trade Kings Limited.
Good morning, Minister. My name is Mubanga Nyuenda from Radio Maria at Sunny Voice. I just wanted to find out, in the quest to help the country access private foreign exchange, and for us as Zambia being a landlocked country, will the ministry consider introducing the use of foreign currencies in domestic transactions in Zambia? We've seen Zimbabwe has only 5 cases of the virus, but they are doing it.
Honorable Minister, the name is Wenson Mavora from Diamond TV. First things first, I'd like to find out, both of you have been, describing this time as an opportunity for local entrepreneurs or SMEs to be able to manufacture that which we consume as a people. But what I'd like to find out, amidst challenges such as increased cost of doing business, to make that a reality, what is it that you're doing as government? And the Zambia Federation of Employers yesterday made recommendations such as downward revision of certain statutory contributions to give them breathing room as businesses to operate and ensure that job losses are avoided. Will there be consideration to that effect? And I also take advantage of the presence of the taxman in the House, our chief taxman, Mr. Kingsley Chanda. I only heard about excise duty and another tax, but I did not hear something to do with VAT or maybe turnover tax. Are you also making consideration to be able to make adjustments to those particular taxes so that businesses can have that breathing room? Inflation is now 14%, and payee has not been mentioned among the taxes that are being adjusted downwards. Can consideration be made to that effect as well? Thank you very much.
The vote of thanks and then the responses.
Good morning, Honorable Minister. Bomba Chumbuli from the Daily Nation newspaper. I'd like to find out, in your statement, you mentioned that government will release 2.5 billion to ease liquidity in the market. I'd like to find out when exactly the money will be released. Thank you.
Honorable Minister, those are the questions. However, I'm reminded that there was a question which you didn't tackle. This is to do with what is your estimated revenue loss from the measures that you've pronounced. At this point in time, may I invite Mr. Ernest Mande to give us a vote of thanks, and thereafter the Honorable Minister and the High Table will respond and close the event. Thank you.
Honorable Minister of Finance, Minister of Commerce, Trade and Industry, Minister of Mines, government officials, all invited guests. As I give this vote of thanks, I would like to recognize that government has acted in the best faith, in the best interest of the Zambian people, looking at the way they have handled the coronavirus effect. My colleagues from ZAM, colleagues from ZAKI, Zambia Federations of Employers, may stand to give testimony to this. I have been involved in about 4 meetings with government to look at various mitigative effects that we can take as a country, and this is the 5th meeting that I've attended. And I thank you, Minister of Finance, for the mitigative approach that you have taken towards us who are in industry, and indeed to help us compel the economy and move it forward, because we are a small economy. Minister, you may be aware that, for example, the manufacturing sector contribution to the GDP of this country is just about 7%. And if anything was done to close down, I don't think the manufacturing sector would be able to wake up after the virus has ended and we are in peacetime, because the COVID-19 is being treated as wartime. Minister, as I applaud you, I would like you to consider in your piecemeal approach, which is working very effectively for the country, by not hitting us with a close down or such related things as other countries that have stronger economies have done, that you will be supportive to industry. You will look at submissions that we have made regarding, for example, in manufacturing, having bilateral talks with countries that are on close down, so that our raw materials that we need for certain manufacturing can be brought in easily and peacefully and be applied and used in our industries. I want to also thank you, Minister, for having addressed the fact that we need to move and change our mindset as Zambians to focus on buying local products. As ZAM, we have emphasized the produce local, manufacture local, buy local, use local. It helps grow and stimulate our Zambian economy. And at times like this, it shows that our economy, which is in ICU, can move out of this incubation period and grow. And indeed, the idea that we need to refocus and have ideas to grow the economy by motivating ourselves into productivity rather than importation of finished goods. I want to look at subject matters that are affecting the country with COVID-19, such as ethanol. We have ethanol that is being produced locally. I'm happy that your government has listened and dropped the 125 duty that was being charged. But I would want to ask through the Minister of Commerce and yourself that companies that are producing ethanol locally revert to prices that were being charged before this difficulty started. Minister, I may wish to inform you that certain producers of ethanol have increased this product by almost 700%, and this will not help in this fight, especially considering the poorest of the poorest, as your government stands on that policy. Minister, furthermore, I would want to thank you and the people of Zambia that have realized that to combat COVID-19, we need to work as a team. And I urge all people within our country to look at all things that government has put in place as designed for saving lives and indeed protecting us as Zambians. I thank you, Minister. I thank you all.
Thank you very much, Ernest. Let me just deal with the last few questions. The question from Mubanga. If I did understand Mubanga, what you're basically suggesting is that we should give up the kwacha as a legal tender. Now, I don't know whether depreciation of a currency is a legitimate reason for changing your legal tender. I don't think that's how it works out. I think the challenge of adopting another currency is quite huge. And I think it takes us into the whole issue of how you manage monetary policy and how you're able to control your economy and so on. So it's not as rosy as it might seem from a distance that you can adopt a currency which doesn't depreciate. The challenges that go with it are enormous. So I don't think we are changing the legal tender right now. We are staying where we are. The gentleman from Diamond listed a number of taxes that he thinks we should be looking at, particularly given the fact that inflation has gone up and so on. I did mention earlier on that, you see, we need to strike that fine balance between the revenue that the state needs to be able to carry out its operations, and also the relief that the companies need to be able to survive well under the current circumstances. It's that balance that we need to strike. I mean, yesterday I was given a whole long list of the taxes that I need to waive. And after I'd looked at that list, the long and short of it is, what industry was telling me is, don't impose any tax on us. In other words, collect zero tax. Now, it can't work. So we will be engaging industry, we'll be engaging the business community. And I want the business community to start thinking beyond just tax here, tax relief here, tax relief there, but think more comprehensively in terms of, if a certain tax relief was given, what would be the overall benefit? And you should be able to demonstrate to us what the benefit would be. I know that some of the benefits may not be immediate, but they'll be in the medium term or in the long term, but we still need to know that. Otherwise, when you give up all these taxes, it just results in loss of revenue, and there is absolutely nothing coming back to us. So we are ready for a conversation, a serious conversation with our friends in industry, our friends in commerce. But it must not just be about take this tax out, take this tax out, take this tax out. I need to mention the point. I have a government to finance. I have a government to run, and I can't run that government with nothing. But we need to meet each other halfway, and I hope that we can find ourselves in a place where we have better conversation around how this can be done. Now, Mumba wanted to know when this 2.5 billion will be paid. I think yesterday we authorized the payment to the pension. So the part of the amount that is supposed to be going to provide relief to the pension fund, the public sector pension fund, I think was authorized yesterday to go. The other component relating to providers of goods and services to government, we have a verification exercise going at this point in time, so that we are sure that we are paying people who truly indeed did supply goods and services to government, that we are not paying people who supplied fresh air. I'm not saying that it's happening, but there's a possibility that some may not have supplied what they said they supplied, or some may have inflated the amount relating to what they supplied. So there's a verification exercise going on, and as we verify ministry by ministry, then we'll disperse accordingly. From the measures lost revenue, PS budget, will you be able to say how much loss of revenue from the measures that are announced this morning?
Thank you very much, Honourable Minister. Maybe just to refer to the issue of the SI-90, which we have discussed with the various stakeholders, we quantified that one, that we are going to lose about 800 million kwacha. But in the process of actually implementing that, we'll look for some counter measures that will, in the final analysis, it will be a neutral impact. Because what really happens is that if we are going to have a loss of 800 million, it means certain expenditures have to be squeezed. So in the process of administering the taxes, we will find a way of getting that 800 million back. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think we have come to the end, and it just remains for me to thank all of you for coming, for giving us this opportunity, and just to remind you, please keep a safe distance. That social distancing thing is real. The coronavirus is real in terms of what damage it can do to all of us. You journalists, I'm looking at our youngsters. We want you to leave. We want you to leave. You have a country waiting for you to manage ahead of you. So please, let us be careful. Let us follow the directives that have been given. The President was very clear in terms of what he wants us to do. I know there was an issue, somebody was raising the issue that the President said, well, if there's 50 of you in a room, it is okay. I said, you must understand the spirit within which the President said it. 50, yes. But also take into account what's the size of the room. When the President said 50, he didn't say when you have a small room, all of you can cramp yourself in that room because it's 50. The President was, I think, appealing to our common sense that let us not crowd ourselves, because it's the crowding that is not safe. That is what the President was saying. And I think we want you to survive. We want you to live. And I can only appeal to your common sense and to your judgment, your better judgment, that you conduct yourself properly, and please stay safe. I thank you.
Thank you very much, Honourable Minister. That marks the end of
emphasis on
the
the economy and how we can be able
to. It only leaves me to
bring
thank
back
my colleagues from the media.
And, so we are expected to adhere to what has been outlined there. Chileshe is already standing by for us to just give us a wrap up from there.
Economy. The challenge is on local manufacturers, obviously, to take up the challenge and produce locally made goods, and the Buy Zambian campaign, very important at this point. There are various pronouncements that have been made, and we will continue with the conversations from here and in studio and throughout the week. But for now, we take you back to studio to Sam Machishi just to conclude what has been said here today. Remember to keep safe and protect yourselves by observing the highest levels of hygiene standards. Remember, that is the clarion call when it comes to the COVID-19, and we hope that we are also delivering the message right to you, our viewers. My name is Chileshe Kangwa. Goodbye.
Kangwa from Lungush International Conference Center, where the minister was addressing the nation regarding the developments in the Zambian economy. The elephant in the room is to save the Zambian economy amidst the corona. Quickly, as Economics Association of Zambia, what should the Zambian people take home regarding what the minister has pronounced?
That some form of fiscal stimulus has been given, though we might argue and say more could have actually been done. There are, I think Mr. Dudia did raise some very, very key issues around ethanol to say maybe he would have expected the minister to be a bit more aggressive and just zero rate the importation of, say, sanitizers. But at the same time, the tone in which the minister speaks is very, very clear, because there's very little that can come from the monetary side. And on the fiscal side, fiscal space seems to be a little bit of an issue. But then better something than nothing at all completely. So I guess, and then the drive towards local manufacturing, I think the Minister of Commerce as well did say it was an opportunity, but then it should not take COVID-19 for us to see the opportunities that we have. These are conversations that would have already had.
I know that as the economist,
yes,
you continue talking even after this one. The private sector seems to have been given a shot in the arm. 2.5 billion kwacha released, which is going to also tackle the issues of SMEs.
Yes, well, I think that's quite an interesting package, albeit that in the 2020 budget, 12.5 billion kwacha was allocated towards servicing domestic debt. So, you know, when we are saying 2.5 billion kwacha, I'm wondering, is this part of that 12.5, or is this a special dispensation? Because otherwise it's dropped by 10 billion kwacha. But it will be good to see that government is paying some attention to looking at how they can keep the domestic industry up and going, and also tackling the coronavirus epidemic with the idea of trying to eradicate it, to ensure that we go back to normal business. But again, my appeal to the minister is we can't wait. Removing duty on ethanol basically was answering one manufacturer's concern, that we are manufacturing sanitizers and the supply of ethanol has increased the price of ethanol by, I don't know, was it 700% or something like that? Meaning that those small bottles of sanitizers which went from 6 kwacha to 25 kwacha is not the fault of the manufacturer, but it's coming from the supply of the raw material. We're going to play this blame game and people will die while this is going on. My view is that the minister should have opened up the market. Look at what has happened in Europe. The European countries are importing masks from China. They're importing sanitizers from anywhere in the world because they're dealing with an epidemic which on a daily basis is increasing. 2 days ago, United States was number 3 on the list of infections. Today it is number 1. It has just taken 72 hours for the United States position to change drastically.
And it will continue around this conversation. I know that it has raised a lot of questions, and technocrats such as yourselves, and also new ideas are being born out of what we've gotten today. Conclusively, as Economics Association of Zambia, is there life still in the economy of Zambia based on what we've been given?
Well, yes, of course there is life, but then remember that there's also the aspect of we need to curb this vice. And curbing of this vice will really much depend on people's behaviors. It's a human issue. So the way we handle this issue, how serious we take, and how well we respond to the coronavirus pandemic will then determine if we are going to have an economy after this.
So lastly, Mr. Doja, the private sector plays a role to keep the economy intact?
Yes, I think that the private sector must be very cognizant that life is not going to be as okay as it was 2 weeks ago. We are all going into toned down mode, where we are looking at keeping our businesses going and removing the luxuries and downsizing our businesses so we can remain in business to be able to pick up after the coronavirus is wiped out. It's everybody's concern. We must all put our hands and heads together, not physically, but virtually, so that we can beat this virus and get back to life and rebuilding a future for Zambia.
We appreciate your company, both of you, for being with us from start to this end. Mr. Mtisunga Zulu, Economics Association of Zambia National Secretary. Mr. Yusuf Dodia, Private Sector Development Association Chairperson. Unfortunately, we are not able to shake hands for today. We can just that. Thank you indeed. We're trying to take note of the social distancing that goes with the prevention of the spread of COVID-19. My sign language interpreter, Obed Mangwe, on behalf of the entire studio crew, my producer Franklin Tembo Jr., the outside broadcast team at Mulungushi International Conference Center. Keep watching ZMBC TV1, your public service broadcaster. Coming up, Shopping Guide.
Here at Zambian Breweries, your health and safety is our #1 priority. And so I'm going to share 3 tips which you can follow in order to keep safe during these challenging times preventing the coronavirus. First, to hand sanitize. In the event that you don't have access to clean running water, you can use the alcohol-based sanitizer until such time you have access to clean running water. Number 2, always ensure that you avoid any contact with anyone who has flu or cold-like symptoms. And number 3, always ensure that if at all you don't have tissues and you have to blow your nose, you blow into your elbow. Again, I can only reiterate that you're our #1 priority. Our people are our greatest asset.
Coronavirus as a pandemic needs simple solutions to combat it. One of the preventive measures is about social distancing. And it's good to notice that our Lusaka plant has followed suit to implement what Ndola has done by just marking on the ground, on the floor, showing where staff can stand. As you can see, this is a very good measure of ensuring that all our staff implement social distancing of about 1 meter to 2 meters spacing. And this is brilliant for what our teams when staff come here, disinfecting, so disinfecting hands, maintaining space between ourselves as colleagues who promote in a large way measures that are meant to combat coronavirus 2019. Thank you so much.
Hello Zambian Breweries team. I quickly want to give you an update on the preventive measures we have put in place for the coronavirus. So as you have seen, we have in the canteen, we only allow currently 3 people to sit at one table. We also added additional tables to the outside in Lusaka in order to manage the throughput of people in the canteen. We also ask you to keep a distance when you're queuing at the tuck shop or in the canteen in order to have a distance of 1.80 meters or even 2 meters. The safety meeting will be also rearranged. Less people will attend the meeting. The meeting will happen, but it is important that not too many people are in a closed room because the risk of transmission is given. What is for me the most important is that you keep your personal hygiene, which means you have to wash your hands as much as possible, especially if you come from an area, from the canteen or from a meeting room. If you were touching the handrails at the at the steps. So please wash your hands, wash your hands and wash your hands. And then another ask from my side is that if you have any symptoms of coronavirus, which means an increased temperature, if you have fever, if your nose is running, please go to the doctor and don't come to work and keep distance to people at home, but also at work. I think this is absolutely critical. If we stick to these rules and if we are all responsible, we can ensure that the spread of the virus we can slow down. And I think this is the most important. I want to show you that little graph here. You can see if we take preventive measures, the curve of the infection will be like this, which means our health system is capable to cope with it. If we don't take any measures, the curve will look like this. And this is what we are currently facing in Italy, for example, or in Germany, my home country, where people get infected at a very high rate and the health system can't cope with it. So let's be responsible, let's wash our hands, and let's keep personal hygiene, and I'm very, very sure that we can survive this in a good way. Thank you very much, stay healthy, and all the best.
Tafikanso makamaka na programino ya shopping guide programino tupasani zosiana mwamene tigulisa malonda yosiana mulinaine Damazio Piri aka Gadabu pali pano makamaka ndina kamzanga kamsikana kokongola tuendani zina yako iwe
zina yanga ndine Mapalo Chivale.
Mapalo Chivale, ladies and gentlemen, makamaka msikana wa Chivemba okongola. Mwanga musapula bwina kuti tikaliboti tikambe pa program yathu yaliro tifatikuze kuti mufunika muzive kuti kuli matenda yamene yaliko. Mungaone kuti mwadabu kuti atavala bwanji, so nichifukwa chakuti kuli matenda yamene yabwera kwa ya corona yamene yavuta. Covid-19 yavuta matenda haya. Tiyentuone kuti tisisunga safe kametilili kumanyumba. Ngati mulina ka sanitizer zitireni makamaka kumanja mwazola puno bwino kotero kuti vantu tisadwalisa meti na upafupi ndiponso mameti maenda mosiyanasiyana osagwira